up, guys? Long time no see. It's been a while. Sorry, I had a couple things going on and haven't had time to get to any editing. I have a whole bunch of videos and stuff that I still have to post. I'll probably wait a little bit until winter time just to give me something to do while we're all sitting inside freezing, waiting to get back out on the lake. So what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna go over like my favorite fall baits, what I use most of the time in the fall. The fish are getting shallow. It's getting cold. Our first few cold fronts have come through, so fall fishing is it's like been the turnover period here for the past couple weeks. So it's, you know, you're catching a couple here and there, but none of them are really grouped up like they should be. It's getting closer to that time. I took a buddy of mine out a couple days ago, and we had a lot of fun with a frog. So it's getting closer to that time. It's coming really fast. Last time the water temperature was just in the 60s, so 63, 64. So it's getting closer. Typically too, I'll stay in the shallow water, like shallower than 5 foot, all the way up until 50 degrees. After 50 degrees, then, you know, those fish start to move out towards their winter haunts, and they seem to disappear for good. Sometimes you can get away with going down all the way to 48 degrees. Really depends on how long it takes to get there. So these are my top baits for the fall, and these are the baits that I'm going to use strictly for the fall time, and I really don't throw anything else. My boat is lined with these baits, and that's it. My number one go-to during the fall period is definitely KVD Sexy Frog. This is the frog right here. It's a green pumpkin top with a shark or a white bottom. I use the frog probably 95, 96, 97% of the time. I really keep this frog in my hand. Now what you guys got to understand about fall too is fall can be a tough period. It's not one of those times where you're going to go out and absolutely destroy them, you know. Fall is a time for big fish. So if you can stand to throw a frog for as long as you possibly can, whether you're getting bit or not, I'm telling you, if you want to catch a giant bass, one of the biggest ones you're going to catch all year, keep that frog in your hand. I've had a lot of people ask, well, why throw a frog? Everything's dying off, you know. What you want to look for is you want to look for those mats that are still there. Now, the water all over the world is high right now because of all the rain. But you want to find those isolated mats where there's still matted vegetation. You know, you need grass on top that's matted over, or else it's worthless. It's not a bait that you really want to throw in open water. In the fall time, you want to stick it as close to those mats as you can. And another mistake that a lot of people make is that you don't realize how shallow is shallow. You know, when I'm fishing in the fall, I consider shallow less than 3 foot. You know, I mean, those fish get super shallow. Like if you're fishing as close as your boat can possibly get, that's where you want to be. Try to get even closer. You'll be surprised at how shallow they'll get. There was one last year I caught in the middle of October, was a 7+ pounder, and several 6s that were all within, you know, their back was almost out of the water. So that's how shallow they'll get. You still have to remember you're going to look for deep water access. So they have to have deep water access nearby for them really big fish. Another thing that I normally do until the water kind of cools off too much where you don't hear it anymore is I listen for bait. You'll hear bluegill popping on the surface. It sounds like popcorn. Listen up for that, because I'll just kind of keep the trolling motor on high and cover water and cover water and cover water, and as soon as I start hearing that popping, I know that there's fish nearby. That's a huge key, because there's a lot of times where you'll cover so much water and you're like, there is no way that I just covered that much water without getting bit. But it's a really good possibility. It happens all the time, especially in the fall. There's little areas that hold big concentrations of fish, and that's it. You know, you're gonna have to go all over the lake to find it. You're gonna have to cover a lot of water, and that's the main key to why I keep moving baits in my hand. So my number one is definitely the KVD Sexy Frog. Colors, I don't really think that it's that important. As a typical rule of thumb, on cloudy days I'll use a darker one, and on sunny days I'll use a brighter one. That's just kind of the rule of thumb I've always followed. It's what I have confidence in, but if there's a certain color that you have confidence in, then by all means throw that one. So number one will definitely be the frog. Number two is going to be a buzzbait. Now the buzzbait, I've showed you also how I modify my buzzbaits. So make sure that you modify it before you start throwing it. Get that blade nice and tore up and making that nice chirping noise. Definitely my second go-to would be buzzbait. Now, the buzzbait I kind of switch on and off now. Like if I'm covering water and I find some grass, and I'm throwing the frog in the grass, and then if there's another 50 yards of nothing but open water with sporadic grass, that's when the buzzbait comes in handy. That's when you want to throw this, because you can just keep on buzzing down the lake and just throw your buzzbait, and then as soon as you get to another patch of grass, you can pick up that frog. So number one, definitely want to cover a lot of water. Keep that in the back of your mind. Is you're not going to get a lot of bites, but the ones you do get will be worth it, I promise you. So number two, definitely the buzzbait, covering water, as much water as you can. When it's open water, throw the buzzbait. On grass, throw the frog. Real simple, all right? Number three is definitely going to be my spinnerbait. Okay, this particular one is a Strike King burner in a 1/2 ounce. And the only modifications that I make to this are, here, I'll take it out of the package so I can show you. And now, if you want this bait to run faster, so if you feel like it's running too slow and it's sagging too much and you're keeping it up too high in the water column, bend this bar in towards the head like that. Just keep flexing it in until it rides really close and straight like that. What that's going to do is that's going to make that bait track a lot faster, okay? This is the Sexy Shad color. I also throw white and chartreuse a lot, straight chartreuse, but I always stick with 2 willow blades in the fall, okay? Every now and again, if I feel like this red is kind of getting, might be taken away from a few of the bites that I'm getting, or if they're short striking it, I'll paint these red ones black, okay? I don't know what it is. It's a confidence thing for me. I don't like red, so if I feel the need to, then I'll color those black. So that's the Strike King burner. Now, the spinnerbait is going to shine once the water starts getting a little bit colder. I mean, you're going to catch them on it now. Obviously, it catches fish all the time, but I'm going to use the spinnerbait around wood, any kind of laydown that I see, or any kind of pilings or wood posts or anything that's wood. I'm going to throw the spinnerbait around. Another really key thing that you want to think about in the fall is, if you look at most of these baits, they ride high in the water column, right? And the reason that I feel like that happens in the fall is because these fish are so keyed in on bait fish, right? So they're no longer, really digging down deep for crawfish or big gizzard shad or anything. They're strictly worried about those high rising bait fish. They're trying to fatten up for the winter. So majority of the time they're looking up, okay? So in the summertime a lot they're looking down. Some of them occasionally are looking up, but for the most part they're looking down. Now, since it's the fall time, they're all looking up for their bait, okay? So anything you want it to rise high in the water column. I don't care what it is. It's always going to be, near the surface or a couple feet below. So spinnerbait, typically I'll start throwing this a lot more and focus on keeping this in my hand 95% of the time once the water gets down below 55, okay? So that's where the spinnerbait holds a place for me in the fall. And keep in mind too, I live in Pennsylvania, so we're talking about the northeast states here. In Alabama or South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, that water temperature is irrelevant. So it's kind of more directed towards the northeast on these water temperature based theories that I'm coming up with, okay? So that's the spinnerbait. The last one, this is more of an early fall bait, but you can also throw it a lot in the fall right now, is your standard Zoom Super Fluke, okay? Now with the fluke, I'm gonna rig it weightless, no weight on it. I'm gonna throw it on a bait caster, and I'm gonna throw it on like 17 to 20 pound fluoro. Okay, fluoro helps the bait get down just a little bit, but you can also throw it on braid, you can throw it on mono, whatever line you want to use. It really doesn't matter. But I'm gonna Texas rig this with a Trocar EWG Z-bend. These are the hooks that I use on it, and the way that I hook it, the biggest key to fishing a fluke is you want to make sure that your entire bait is covered, because if not, it's not going to have that natural back and forth action. So once you go in the top, make sure it's straight, okay? And you come out the bottom, make sure that's all perfectly straight. When you ride it all the way down to the end, tie your line on now when you still have that exposed, and then you want to push that fluke up completely over top of that, so it's covering that piece right there. Okay, the line and where the line tie is. And then I just push the hook through the back of it like that, and then just skin hook it. So your bait's riding just like that. See where it's skin hooked? Okay. Now that, if your bait is pulled off of that line tie a little bit, it's gonna cause that bait to run one way. So if you notice that your bait, when you're popping it, you know, working it like a jerk bait, like you would, it'll just keep going to one side instead of going back and forth, okay? What I do generally with the fluke is this, I'll work this thing anywhere. Grass, open water, wood, whatever you want to do with it. You know, let it hit the surface, let it fall for a little bit, and then you're just going to pop it a couple times, let it slowly work itself back and forth, and then kill it. And let it kind of do its flutter down to the bottom, and then pop it 1, 2, 3 times, let it sit, and then let it flutter back down to the bottom. It takes a little bit longer to work, but if you know fish are in the area, that's the one you want to go with, okay? So number 4 is the super fluke with the Trocar EWG Z-bend hook. They're super strong, and they have a good bend to them. Now, the last but not least, for sure, I catch tons of big fish on this throughout the year. But in the fall, if I'm getting, you know, you'll get plenty of blow-ups on a frog and they'll completely miss it. Or they just don't want to get it. Or you have one come up on your buzzbait and you know exactly where he's at, right? Then that's when you want to put down that rod, pick up your tube. Strike King coffee tube, 4.5 flipping tube. One of my favorite all-time baits, black and blue, okay? Once that happens, this is what I'm going to have this tied on for. I'm going to flip it right in there, and 9 out of 10 times where that strike came and he missed it, he's going to get this, okay? Now, with that being said, you want this to be on a light weight, okay? Like I said, they're looking up, so you want this bait to be on a quarter ounce weight. Should be enough. If it's windier, you might want to go a little bit heavier, but you want to have this ready exactly for that. You know, or if you throw by a piece of wood and you're reeling your spinnerbait and it gets bumped, throw that in there, you'll get bit, okay? So that's what I use the tube for. It's just basically a follow-up bait. You can probably do it with anything, but when that water's cold, you don't want a whole lot of action on your bait, like I went over in my jig video before. The tubes the hook that I'm going to throw my tubes on is a Trocar tube hook. It's the TK 190. And this is a 3-aught hook, one of my favorite tube hooks ever made. The keeper holds it on good. It's got a super bend to it. The hooks are super sharp, and it straight keeps them pinned, okay? So that's my fall setup right there. That's everything that I do in the fall. I'm really not leaving anything out. If you guys got any other questions or you want to see anything before the end of the year, let me know. I'll get working on those other videos for you, and hopefully this will help you out, get you guys to catch a giant fish. All right, see you.